The afternoon began with warmth and movement, the kind that made everything feel normal and safe, as Daniel's backyard filled with familiar faces, folding chairs scraping the deck, soft music playing from a speaker near the grill, and the smell of burgers floating in the air, while Emily moved through it all with a practiced smile, greeting friends, adjusting plates, keeping one eye on 7-year-old Noah as he ran through bubbles blown by a neighbor, her heart feeling both full and tired at the same time, because birthdays always did that to her, especially Daniel's, reminding her of how long they had been together, how much life had changed since they were young and careless and sure of everything. And as Daniel stood near the table accepting birthday wishes, tall, calm, steady as he always was, Emily watched him with a mix of love and quiet frustration she hadn't named out loud, the kind that comes from years of giving and adjusting and swallowing small disappointments. And when Daniel lifted his cup and laughed, thanking everyone and then turning to Emily with a smile that said more than words, thanking her for standing by him, for being strong, for everything she had given up to build their family, something inside Emily tightened, because those words landed heavier than he knew, carrying memories of missed chances, paused dreams, nights she cried alone while feeding a baby, moments she felt invisible even while being needed, and without thinking, without slowing down, she laughed too, a quick sharp laugh meant to keep things light, and said the sentence that would change everything, saying loudly, casually, "You're lucky I didn't abort our kid," expecting it to land as dark humor, as the kind of joke adults sometimes make when life feels overwhelming, but instead it dropped like glass shattering, cutting the air clean in half, and the music seemed too loud and then too quiet all at once. Conversation stopped mid-word, someone near the grill coughed, and Daniel's smile disappeared so fast it scared her, his face going still, his eyes searching hers as if trying to understand what he had just heard, while Noah, who had run back toward them, slowed down, sensing the shift even if he didn't understand the words, and Emily felt a sudden heat rush to her face, realizing too late that the sentence didn't sound playful, didn't sound tired or ironic, but sounded sharp and careless and cruel, especially spoken out loud, especially in front of their child, and she opened her mouth to soften it, to laugh again, to explain, but the moment had already slipped beyond her control, because Daniel said nothing, absolutely nothing, and that silence was heavier than shouting, heavier than anger. It felt like the ground beneath her feet had shifted, and people around them began to move again, too quickly, laughing a little louder than before, someone turning up the music, someone else calling Noah over for cake, all of them trying to pretend nothing had happened, while Emily stood frozen, watching Daniel take a slow breath and nod politely at a friend who clapped him on the shoulder, his body still there but his attention clearly somewhere far away, and Emily's heart began to race as she followed him with her eyes, noticing how he avoided looking at her, how his shoulders seemed tense, how different he suddenly felt even though he hadn't moved, and she told herself it was fine. That couples joked like this all the time, that Daniel knew her better than anyone, that he knew she loved Noah more than her own life, but doubt crept in anyway, because the words had come too easily, because some part of her had meant them in a way she didn't want to face, and as the party went on, Emily moved through it like a ghost, smiling when spoken to, cutting cake, handing out plates, while inside her thoughts spiraled fast, replaying the sentence over and over, wishing she could rewind 10 seconds and choose silence instead, and every time she glanced at Daniel, he was still kind, still polite, but distant, like a door quietly closing without a sound, and when Noah tugged at her hand asking why Dad looked sad, Emily's chest tightened, because she didn't have an answer that felt safe, and she realized then that what she thought was a joke had revealed something raw and private in the most public way possible, and that sometimes the damage isn't loud or dramatic, sometimes it's subtle, happening right in front of everyone while they smile and eat cake. And as the sun began to lower and guests slowly left, thanking them for a lovely afternoon, Emily felt a growing fear settle in her stomach, because Daniel still hadn't said a word about it, not a single question, not a single comment, and she knew that whatever came next would not be easy, because the party was over, the laughter was gone, and the truth she hadn't meant to say was now standing between them, waiting. Night fell quickly after the last car left the driveway, the quiet settling into the house like a weight, and Emily moved through the kitchen on instinct, collecting cups, wiping counters, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of water running as Daniel washed his hands in the bathroom, neither of them speaking, both pretending the silence was temporary, while Noah brushed his teeth upstairs, unaware of how fragile everything suddenly was, and when Daniel finally came back, he did not sit beside Emily as he usually did but chose the far end of the table, his posture stiff, eyes fixed on the wood grain, as if it held answers, and Emily felt panic rise because this was worse than shouting, worse than slammed doors, and she tried to fill the space with words, saying she hadn't meant it, that it was a joke, that she was tired and overwhelmed, speaking fast as if speed could erase meaning, but Daniel lifted a hand gently, not angry, just firm, and said her name quietly, asking her to stop for a moment, and that calmness broke something in her because it meant he was thinking carefully, not reacting, and when he finally spoke, his voice was steady but distant, saying he couldn't understand why she would say something like that, not to strangers, not to their child, not about something so sacred to him, and Emily felt defensive without wanting to be, reminding him of how hard motherhood had been, how she had lost herself, how no one talked about that part, and Daniel listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, but when she finished, he said that struggle did not excuse hurting their son, that words had weight, and tonight they had landed in a place that could not be ignored, and Emily felt tears come, not dramatic, just heavy, because she realized he wasn't wrong, and she tried again, softer this time, telling him she loved Noah more than anything, that she would never undo his existence, that the sentence didn't reflect her heart, but Daniel looked up then, and his eyes were tired, saying that intent didn't erase impact, that he saw Noah's face when the laughter stopped, that he saw confusion there, and that image stayed with him, and they argued after that, not loudly, but deeply, about respect, about shared responsibility, about how long unspoken feelings can grow sharp, and the hours slipped by unnoticed until Noah padded downstairs in pajamas, rubbing his eyes, asking why they were still awake, and Emily forced a smile, lifting him into her arms, while Daniel carried him back upstairs, tucking him in with extra care, sitting longer than usual at the edge of the bed, and when Daniel came back down, he didn't rejoin the conversation, he simply walked to the bedroom and began packing a small bag, and Emily followed him, heart racing, asking what he was doing, telling him this was too much, that they could talk in the morning, but Daniel shook his head slowly, saying he needed space, that he didn't trust himself to sleep beside her with his thoughts so loud, that he wanted to protect Noah from more tension, and Emily stood frozen as he folded shirts, each movement calm and deliberate, and the finality of it hit her harder than any argument could have, because this wasn't drama, it was decision, and she begged then, not loudly, but honestly, asking him not to leave, promising to do better, to think before speaking, to fix what she had broken, and Daniel stopped packing for a moment, resting his hands on the bed, saying he believed she loved them, that this wasn't about punishment, but about understanding the damage, about letting things settle before they became something worse, and when he zipped the bag and walked toward the door, Emily followed, watching him put on his jacket, the same one he wore every winter, the one she had bought him years ago, and she realized how fragile their routines were, how easily life could split into before and after, and when he opened the door, cold air rushed in, and he paused, turning back, saying he would call in the morning, that he wasn't disappearing, just stepping back, and Emily nodded because she couldn't speak, and when the door closed behind him, the sound echoed through the house, too loud for such a small movement, and Emily stood there long after, listening to the silence, replaying every word of the night, understanding too late that what hurt the most was not that he left, but that he left quietly, because it meant he was hurt deeply enough to choose distance over anger, and as she finally sat alone in the living room, dawn beginning to creep through the windows, Emily felt the weight of her words settle fully, realizing that some mistakes don't announce themselves right away, they wait, they grow, and then they change everything. Time moved forward even though Emily felt stuck, days turning into weeks and weeks into months, and the house learned a new rhythm without Daniel in it, quieter mornings, empty space on one side of the bed, Noah's backpack placed by the door instead of handed over with a shared smile, and Daniel kept his promise, staying close enough to be present but far enough to feel gone, picking Noah up for school, helping with homework, showing up steady and calm, while Emily watched from the edges, grateful and aching at the same time, because she saw how careful he was now, how gentle, how intentional with every word around their son, and that made her reflect in ways she hadn't before, pushing her to sit with thoughts she had avoided for years, about who she had been before motherhood, before marriage, before life narrowed into responsibility and routine, and late at night, when Noah slept and the house hummed softly, Emily began to write, not for anyone else but herself, filling pages with feelings she never gave language to, about fear of losing herself, about love that felt heavy because it mattered so much, about the way exhaustion can turn into bitterness when left unspoken, and slowly she understood that the sentence she had laughed out loud was not about rejection but about terror, fear of how much her life had changed and how little room she felt she had left to be just Emily. And that realization hurt because it meant the damage came from something real, something unresolved, not just a careless joke, and during exchanges with Daniel, small moments began to shift, not dramatically but noticeably, longer pauses at the door, brief conversations that drifted beyond schedules, shared looks when Noah said something funny, and one evening, as winter deepened and snow lined the sidewalks, Daniel stayed after dinner, sitting at the kitchen table while Noah built a puzzle nearby, and they spoke about ordinary things, school events, weather, work stress, until the quiet felt less sharp and more thoughtful, and Emily took a breath and admitted she had been wrong, not defensively, not quickly, but fully, saying she had spoken from a place of frustration she didn't understand at the time, and Daniel listened, really listened, his expression guarded but open, and he said he wasn't angry anymore, just cautious, because trust doesn't break loudly, it thins slowly, and rebuilding it takes patience, and Emily accepted that without arguing, because she knew she had no right to rush healing, and after Daniel left that night, she cried, not from despair but from clarity, because she finally saw the moment for what it was, a warning she had ignored until it echoed too far, and from then on, she changed small things, choosing words carefully, listening more than speaking, allowing space for her feelings without letting them harden into resentment, and no one noticed too, sensing the calmer tone, the gentler mornings, asking fewer worried questions, and that alone made the effort worth it, and one afternoon, as spring began to soften the cold air, Daniel stood at the door holding Noah's jacket, and Emily said quietly that she missed them, not just the family they were, but the honesty they once had, and Daniel looked at her for a long moment, the past months visible in his tired eyes, and said he missed it too, but missing was not enough, because healing required understanding, not just longing, and Emily nodded, feeling both the weight and the hope in his words, because for the first time since the party, she felt that something new was growing in the space between them, not a return to what they were, but a chance to become better than before, if they were both willing to move slowly, carefully, and truthfully forward. Spring arrived without asking for permission, melting the last traces of winter and bringing with it a quiet shift in how Emily and Daniel moved around each other, careful but no longer distant, connected by Noah and by something deeper that neither wanted to name too quickly, and routine slowly softened, Daniel staying longer during visits, sometimes helping with dinner, sometimes sitting on the porch while Noah played, the air between them no longer sharp but thoughtful, filled with pauses that felt meaningful instead of awkward, and Emily continued writing, not pages of apology anymore but reflections, learning how to speak honestly without turning pain into weapons, learning that love required patience, even when fear pushed for certainty. And one afternoon, after Noah fell asleep on the couch, Emily handed Daniel a letter, her hand steady even though her heart wasn't, telling him he didn't have to read it, that it was simply the clearest way she knew to speak without interruption or defense, and Daniel took it with a nod, slipping it into his jacket pocket, leaving shortly after with a quiet goodnight, and later, alone in his apartment, he read every word slowly, absorbing her honesty about regret, about fear, about how much she valued their family and how deeply she understood now the harm caused by careless words, and he didn't feel anger as he read, only sadness mixed with relief, because the letter didn't ask him to come back or promise perfection, it simply acknowledged the truth and respected his space, and that mattered more than anything. And days later, Daniel invited Emily and Noah to the park, a simple afternoon that felt like a small step forward, watching Noah laugh on the swings while they stood side by side, close enough to feel familiar, far enough to stay careful, and they talked then, not about the past directly, but about what they wanted for Noah, about kindness, about teaching him how words shape the world, and that conversation felt like a bridge, fragile but real, and over time, more moments like that followed, shared meals, school events attended together, quiet jokes exchanged without tension, and Emily understood that forgiveness was not a single moment but a series of choices, while Daniel understood that leaving had not been an escape but a pause that allowed clarity. And one evening, months after the birthday party, Daniel stayed late, sitting at the kitchen table where everything had once fallen apart, and he told Emily he wasn't ready to move back, but he was ready to keep trying, to rebuild something new instead of chasing what they had lost. And Emily accepted that with gratitude instead of disappointment, because she had learned that rushing love only weakens it, and Noah thrived in the steadiness they created together. Sensing the honesty, feeling secure again, and as summer approached, their home filled with light and laughter that felt earned, not careless, and Emily knew the story of their marriage had changed forever, marked by one sentence spoken without thought, but also by the courage it took to face the damage and grow beyond it. And Daniel knew that love was not proven by staying no matter what, but by returning with intention, and though their future remained uncertain, it was no longer fragile in the same way, because it was built on awareness, restraint, and respect. And in that quiet, imperfect rebuilding, they found something stronger than before, not a fairy tale ending, but a real one, shaped by mistakes, forgiveness, and the understanding that love, when handled with care, can survive even its hardest moments.